Chapter 1. The Ultimate Prank. The woods whispered in the cold April night, a faint breeze rustling through the trees as the cabin stood alone in the darkness. It had been abandoned for years, save for the one night each spring when Jake and his friends returned to uphold their annual tradition, a night of pranks, laughter, and harmless scares. This year, however, would be different. Jake leaned against the kitchen counter, watching as his friends trickled in one by one. Emily, bundled in a thick hoodie, was the first to arrive, setting down a bottle of cheap wine with a smirk. Ryan followed closely behind, still bragging about last year's prank where he'd convinced Jake that his car had been stolen. Sophie rolled in with her usual confidence, carrying a bag of fake blood, her arsenal of tricks prepared in advance. And finally, Marcus, the loudest and most daring of them all, slammed the door shut behind him, grinning wildly. "All right, nerds, who's ready to get humiliated?" Marcus taunted, flopping onto the worn-out couch. Jake grinned but said nothing. He had the perfect trick planned, one they wouldn't see coming. The cabin, though spacious, had an eerie charm, a relic from the 1950s. Its wooden walls creaked with every movement, and the single fireplace at the center of the living room cast long, flickering shadows. A few old portraits hung on the walls, some of them so faded that the faces looked like they were dissolving into the wood. It was the perfect setting for what Jake had in mind. "Gather around," Jake finally said, his voice carrying a dramatic flair. "I've got a story for you all," Emily groaned, sinking into an armchair. "God, not another one of your spooky stories. Didn't you learn from last year? That ghost in the window trick was lame." "Oh, this isn't just a story," Jake said, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. "This is real." That got their attention. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Real, huh?" Jake smirked. "You ever hear about the fool's curse?" Marcus snorted. "What, like a clown haunting or something?" "No," Jake said, stepping closer, lowering his voice for effect. "It's older than that. It's a legend about a jester, a court fool from back in medieval times. His name was lost to history, but the story says he played one prank too many on a king who didn't appreciate the joke. The king had him executed, but not before the fool uttered his final curse. He swore that on the night of April 1st, those who mocked him would pay the price." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Classic." Jake ignored him and continued. "If you say his name 3 times at midnight, he answers with laughter. And once you hear it, you belong to him." The fire crackled in the fireplace, sending shadows dancing along the wooden walls. Marcus leaned forward. "Let me guess. You want us to try it?" Jake's smirk widened. "If you're not scared," Sophie scoffed. "We're not scared. But if this is just another setup for one of your dumb jump scares, I'm gonna punch you in the face." Jake held up his hands in mock surrender. "No tricks, just a little experiment." The group exchanged glances before finally gathering in the center of the room. The only light came from the fire, casting eerie flickers across their faces. The clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight. 11:58 p.m. Ryan fidgeted. Okay, but seriously, what if this does work? Just, hypothetically. Emily nudged him. Oh, please. You scream at your own shadow. Do not. Do too. 11:59 p.m. Jake pulled out his phone, showing them the time. All right, when it hits 12, we all say it together. The room grew silent. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. The fire seemed to dim, casting longer shadows. 12 a.m. A heavy pause filled the air. Then, the fool, the fool, the fool. For a moment, nothing happened. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the old wooden walls. Ryan exhaled a laugh. Wow, so scary. Marcus clapped his hands. All right, Jake, where's the big scare? Did you set up some sound effects? Jake opened his mouth to deny it when a sound echoed through the room. A low, raspy chuckle. It was distant at first, like the wind carrying the remnants of laughter from somewhere far away. Then it grew louder, closer, a breathy, unnatural giggle creeping along the walls, slithering into their ears. The group froze. The laughter continued, slow and deliberate, curling around them like invisible fingers. The fire flickered violently. Then, the lights went out. A sharp gasp escaped Sophie's lips. Marcus cursed under his breath. Someone's phone vibrated, the screen flashing erratically before turning to static. And then, silence. A deep, suffocating silence, so thick it felt as if the house itself were holding its breath. Then, from the darkness, tap, tap, tap. A sound, rhythmic and deliberate, like footsteps or fingers drumming against wood. Emily's voice trembled. Jake, tell me this is part of the prank. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. His voice came out barely above a whisper. I didn't do this. A sharp, echoing laugh rang through the room, and the game began. Sun Chapter 2. The Cursed Tale. The laughter faded, swallowed by the suffocating silence that followed. For a moment, no one moved. The only sounds were their shallow breaths and the distant creaking of the old cabin, as if the house itself was listening. Then Marcus let out a nervous chuckle. Okay, seriously, Jake, that was pretty good. Jake didn't respond. His mind was racing, his hands clenched into fists. He had planned for a scare, but this wasn't part of it. Ryan pulled out his phone and tapped at the screen, but nothing happened. He frowned, shaking it. My phone just died. Mine too, Emily whispered. She was gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The screen was black, unresponsive. Marcus scoffed and stood up. Oh, come on. This is classic prank material. Flickering lights, weird noises. Next, you'll tell me one of us is gonna go missing. Nobody laughed. Sophie crossed her arms. Jake, I swear, if this is some elaborate setup. I didn't do anything, Jake snapped, a little sharper than intended. I had a prank planned, yeah. But this wasn't part of it. A gust of wind slammed against the cabin, rattling the windows. The fire flickered wildly in the hearth, casting jagged shadows that stretched across the walls. Emily swallowed hard. Okay, maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe the power went out because of the storm. Ryan shook his head. There is no storm. Another silence settled over them. Marcus, refusing to let go of his bravado, clapped his hands together. Well, if it's not Jake, then what? we summoned a vengeful spirit. No one answered. The fire crackled loudly. Sparks shot up the chimney, illuminating the faded portrait above the fireplace. A painting of an old-fashioned jester, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. His lips curled into a grin that seemed far too wide. Jake's stomach twisted. That painting hadn't been there before. Ryan, noticing Jake's gaze, turned to look. His expression darkened. Was that always there? Sophie stepped closer, squinting at the eerie artwork. What the hell? This place was empty when we got here. Marcus waved a dismissive hand. It's just some creepy old painting. Who cares? I care, Emily muttered, because it wasn't here an hour ago. Something about the jester's face felt wrong. The eyes, hollow and sunken, seemed to follow them. The longer Jake stared, the more he swore the painted grin was stretching wider. Emily shivered and turned away. Let's just go. Joke's over. We'll come back in the morning. Ryan moved toward the front door and twisted the knob. It didn't budge. He frowned and yanked harder. It's stuck. Jake's stomach dropped. What do you mean it's stuck? Ryan gave the door another firm tug, but it refused to move. I mean, it won't open. Marcus rolled his eyes. Oh, move. He strode over, gripped the handle, and yanked with all his strength. The door remained stubbornly shut, as if something heavy were pressing against it from the other side. A slow, unsettling realization crept into the group. Sophie turned toward the windows, but the view outside was wrong. The trees looked farther away than they had been. The sky was too dark, not the deep navy of night, but an inky black void that seemed to swallow all light. The stars had vanished. Emily took a shaky breath. This isn't funny anymore. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, a voice whispered, "Who's laughing now?" The voice was faint but unmistakable, slithering through the air like a breath against the back of their necks. Marcus froze. What the hell was that? Before anyone could answer, something crashed in the next room. A deep, heavy thud, followed by a dragging sound. Emily's breathing quickened. We're not alone. Jake forced himself to focus. His mind raced back to the legend, the Fool's Curse. He had read about it online while researching urban legends, but he hadn't really believed it. The story, he muttered under his breath. Sophie turned to him. What? The Fool's Curse, Jake said, louder this time. The legend says that if you say his name 3 times at midnight, you hear his laugh, and once you hear it, you're his. Ryan's face paled. That's just a story. Jake shook his head. Yeah, but so was Bloody Mary. So was the Slender Man. And yet, here we are. Another crash, closer this time. Emily gripped Jake's arm. How does the legend end? Jake hesitated. The fool doesn't just scare people, he finally said. He plays with them, tricks them into thinking they're safe, and then he takes them. Marcus exhaled, trying to shake off the tension. You know what? Fine. If this thing wants us, come and get me. Marcus, don't. Too late. Marcus cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, Hey, fool, you hear me? Show yourself. Silence. Then a knock. 1, 2, 3. Slow, deliberate, coming from inside the hallway. Emily whimpered. Sophie grabbed Ryan's arm. Jake turned toward Marcus, heart hammering in his chest. What the hell did you just do? Marcus swallowed hard. For the first time, he looked genuinely unnerved. Then the hallway light flickered, revealing a shadow stretching across the floor. just for a second, something grinned back at them. The fire sputtered out. The room plunged into darkness, and the laughter returned. Chapter 3: No Way Out. The darkness swallowed them whole. For a long moment, the only sound was the ragged breathing of 5 terrified people. The air felt heavier, thicker, like something unseen was pressing down on their chests. Then the laughter began again. Low at first, barely more than a breath in the still air. But it grew louder, curling through the room like smoke, an eerie, rattling cackle that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. Emily let out a strangled gasp, her fingers digging into Jake's arm. Turn the lights back on. Turn them back on now. Jake fumbled in the dark, reaching for his phone, but the screen remained stubbornly black. He wasn't the only one trying. Ryan cursed under his breath as he smacked the side of his dead phone, and Sophie shook hers desperately, whispering, "Come on, come on." Nothing. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. Click, 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 like dress shoes tapping against the wooden floorboards. Ryan sucked in a breath. Who the hell is that? Jake didn't answer. He was too busy staring into the pitch-black hallway, where the last flicker of firelight had revealed something. A shape, barely visible, something just out of sight. And now it was moving. Sophie's voice trembled. "Jake, do something." Jake forced himself to think. This had to be a prank. It had to be. And maybe someone had gotten here before them, set this up. Maybe there was a hidden speaker playing that laughter. Maybe... Creak! The footsteps stopped. Jake swallowed hard. "We need to get out of here, now." Marcus gritted his teeth. No shit. He lunged for the front door and gripped the handle with both hands. He yanked hard. The door refused to budge. "Help me," Marcus barked. Ryan rushed to his side, bracing his foot against the floor as they both pulled. The door didn't move an inch. "It's like it's nailed shut or something," Ryan grunted. Jake spun toward the windows. "Break the glass." Sophie grabbed a chair, lifted it high, and hurled it toward the nearest window. The wooden frame slammed against the glass and bounced off. The glass didn't even crack. Marcus cursed. What the hell? Emily grabbed the fireplace poker and swung it like a baseball bat. The iron rod smashed against the glass, sending a loud metallic clang through the room. But again, the window didn't shatter. Sophie's voice rose in panic. "That's not possible. That's not..." The laughter returned. But this time, it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was inside the room. Jake turned sharply, his breath catching in his throat. His eyes darted over the flickering darkness, the moving shadows. Something shifted, a shape in the corner, a figure standing impossibly still. Then, 2 eyes, not human, not fully formed. Hollow black pits where eyes should have been, and a mouth, a wide stretching grin filled with darkness, curling at the edges like something stitched into place. Jake's stomach dropped, Emily's breath hitched. Ryan choked out, "Oh my God." The figure lurched. Emily screamed. Jake grabbed her arm and yanked her back just as the shadow rushed forward, its form shifting unnaturally, moving too fast, too wrong. The cabin shook as the walls groaned. The ceiling beams trembled. Something deep within the house let out a low, guttural moan, like the whole building was waking up. Marcus stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. "What the hell is that?" Jake didn't wait to find out. He grabbed Sophie's wrist and ran, dragging her toward the back of the house. "The back door. Move." The group sprinted down the hallway, their shadows stretching wildly against the walls as the flickering candlelight barely illuminated their way. The hallway seemed longer. Jake's heart pounded. This wasn't right. The back door was supposed to be right here. But no matter how far they ran, the hallway stretched on, twisting, changing. No, 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 Ryan muttered. Where's the door? Where the hell is the door? Emily clutched Jake's arm. We're trapped. Then, a whisper, right in Jake's ear. Not yet. A hand, cold and skeletal, brushed the back of his neck. Jake spun, swinging blindly, but his fist hit nothing but air. Marcus grabbed his shoulder. Dude, what the hell are you swinging at? Jake's breathing was ragged. His skin crawled where he'd felt the touch. He turned back to the hallway, and the back door was suddenly there, as if it had always been there. Ryan didn't hesitate. He lunged for it, twisted the knob, and it opened. Fresh air. The group burst outside, stumbling onto the wooden porch. The night was too quiet. No wind, no crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. They didn't care. They ran, through the trees, down the dirt path, toward the car. Jake's mind was spinning. What the hell had just happened? Had they imagined it? Had the darkness and panic made them hallucinate? Then up ahead, Marcus skidded to a stop. No, 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 no. Jake nearly crashed into him. What? What is it? Marcus pointed. The car was there, but something was wrong. It wasn't where they'd left it. It was turned around, facing the wrong direction, and all four tires were gone. Ryan cursed. Someone's messing with us. Someone has to be messing with us. Sophie took a step back. Then why do I feel like we're still being watched? Silence. Jake didn't want to turn around, didn't want to look. But he did. And standing at the tree line, just at the edge of the darkness, was the fool. Grinning, waiting. Jake's blood ran cold. Then, a single whisper. You're not done playing yet. And the lights in the cabin flickered back on. Chapter 4. Nowhere to run. For a long moment, no one moved. The fool stood at the tree line, his figure barely illuminated by the dim glow of the cabin lights. He was too far to make out clearly, but his grin, wide, unnatural, stretching too far, was unmistakable. Jake's breath hitched. He couldn't look away. And then, the fool waved. A slow, deliberate motion, a gesture that sent an unnatural chill down Jake's spine. Emily clutched his arm. Jake, what do we do? Ryan took a step forward, voice shaking. Screw this. We run. No, Sophie snapped, grabbing his sleeve. Did you see what just happened in there? What if this isn't real? What if we're still in its game? Marcus clenched his fists. We can't just stay here. Jake's mind was spinning. The rules of horror stories, of urban legends, ran through his head. There was always a pattern, always a way out. But how? How do you escape something that isn't playing by normal rules? He looked back at the car. The missing tires weren't slashed. They were just gone, as if they had never existed. This isn't possible, he muttered. Emily pulled at his sleeve. Jake, please. The fool moved, not walked, shifted. 1 second, he was at the tree line. The next, he was closer. Jake's stomach dropped. Emily let out a sharp breath. He's moving without moving. Sophie took a step back. Oh my God. Ryan turned and ran. Ryan, no, too late. Ryan sprinted down the dirt path, his form quickly swallowed by the darkness. Then, the scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was distorted, warped, stretched, as if the very sound was being pulled apart. Then, silence. Emily gasped. Ryan! Jake grabbed Marcus. Get the car started, now. Marcus fumbled with the door handle and yanked it open. He slid into the driver's seat, pressing the ignition. The engine roared to life. Jake felt a flicker of hope. Go! Marcus slammed his foot on the gas, but the car didn't move. The engine revved, but the wheels didn't turn. Marcus cursed, slamming the pedal again. Nothing, as if the car was stuck in place. Then, a laugh, not from the fool, from the radio. The dashboard screen flickered to life, filled with static. A voice crackled through the speakers, warping and stretching, going somewhere. The headlights blinked, the interior lights pulsed, and then the back door of the car unlocked. Click! Emily screamed. Something's in here. Jake turned, just in time to see the fool's reflection in the rearview mirror. Inside the car, smiling, Jake grabbed Emily and ripped her out of the car just as Marcus scrambled out the front. The moment their feet hit the ground, the doors slammed shut on their own. Then the car began to move, not forward, not backward, up. The vehicle lifted off the ground, floating several feet into the air. Sophie clamped a hand over her mouth. That's not real. That's not real. The car twisted in midair, spinning as if some invisible force was playing with it. Then it dropped. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. The car collapsed inward, folding like paper as if something had crushed it. Jake staggered back, heart hammering. The fool stood just a few feet away now. His body twitched. His head tilted too far to the side, his empty eyes locked onto them. Then, in a voice that wasn't human, that wasn't real, that sounded like several voices overlapping at once. Run! Emily grabbed Jake's hand. Go! They ran, through the trees, through the dark. Branches tore at their skin. Roots threatened to trip them, but they didn't stop. Behind them, the fool's laughter echoed, not from one direction, but from everywhere. Sophie gasped. Where are we even going? Jake's mind raced. The road was gone. The car was gone. They were deep in the woods, running blindly. Then, up ahead, a cabin. Not their cabin, a different one. Older, rotting. Its windows were broken. Its walls covered in strange, scratched symbols. Marcus hesitated. No way. That place is worse than the woods. Jake didn't care. He yanked open the door and shoved Emily inside. The others followed. The moment Jake slammed the door shut, the air changed. The laughter stopped. The night outside was silent. Emily clutched her chest. I can't breathe. Jake turned, scanning the room. The inside was wrong. The walls weren't solid. They seemed to pulse, as if breathing. The floorboards looked warped, curving upward in ways that didn't make sense. Sophie whispered, "What is this place?" Marcus turned toward the fireplace. "Guys." Jake followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. Above the fireplace was a painting, not of the fool, of them. Jake, Emily, Marcus, Sophie, Ryan. 5 figures standing in the exact same positions they were in right now, except Ryan's face was missing, not just blurred, gone. A black void where his head should be. Jake swallowed hard. This was waiting for us. Emily's breath hitched. Then that means, creak! The door behind them swung open, and Ryan stepped inside. But something was wrong. His movements were stiff, unnatural. His arms hung limply at his sides, his head tilted at a sharp angle. And when he lifted his face, he had no mouth. Emily screamed. Ryan's hand shot out, too fast. His fingers elongated, stretching toward them. Jake grabbed Emily and shoved her behind him. Marcus backed up. That's not Ryan. That's not Ryan. The thing that looked like Ryan twitched. Then it grinned. A mouth, not Ryan's mouth, but something else entirely, ripped open across his face. And from that impossible gaping maw, the fool's voice echoed. The game isn't over. The cabin plunged into darkness, and the screaming began. The Chapter 5, the game deepens. The darkness was absolute. It swallowed the cabin whole, suffocating, stretching, alive. Jake couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then the whispers started, soft at first, curling through the blackness like smoke. Voices layered on top of each other, muttering in tones that didn't belong to this world. Some laughed, others wept, and beneath it all, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. Emily's grip on Jake's arm tightened. Jake, a hand, cold, unnatural, brushed against his face. He swung blindly, his fist meeting nothing. Then, a light, flickering, dim, wrong. A lantern. It hung in the center of the cabin, suspended in midair, casting long, writhing shadows against the warped walls. Jake's stomach twisted. The room had changed. The walls were no longer wood, but stone, rough, damp, ancient. The windows were gone. The door, too. They were somewhere else. Sophie's voice trembled. Where the hell are we? Marcus spun, his breath ragged. No. This is not possible. Ryan, or the thing that had become Ryan, was gone. Jake didn't know if that was better or worse. Then, from the shadows, something moved. A shape slithering just beyond the lantern's reach. A figure stepped forward. Not the fool, not Ryan. Something else. A woman. At least she had once been. Her skin was gray, stretched too tightly over sharp bones. Her eyes, hollow pits of darkness, were locked onto Jake. Her mouth curled into a ruined, jagged grin. Emily choked back a sob. Who is that? The woman's neck cracked as she tilted her head. Then she whispered, You're playing wrong. Jake's breath hitched. What? The woman twitched. April 1st, she rasped. April 1st. April 1st. Her voice warped, cracked, twisted. She lunged. Marcus shoved Jake aside as the woman rushed forward, her body bending, breaking, moving too fast. Jake hit the ground hard, his vision spinning. The woman loomed over Marcus, her fingers elongating into clawed, bony hands. Then she stopped. Her head jerked violently to the side, as if something unseen was pulling her back. Her body convulsed, and then she let out a horrifying, distorted laugh. Not her laugh, the fool's. Her mouth stretched wider, 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 until it wasn't a mouth anymore, but a gaping void of blackness. And inside that void, eyes, dozens of them, watching, waiting, grinning. Then she spoke, or rather, they did. The fool's voice layered over itself 100 times. It's still your turn. Jake grabbed Marcus and yanked him back as the woman's arms stretched unnaturally toward them. Emily screamed. The lantern flickered violently. And then, the room changed again. The stone walls rippled like liquid. The ceiling collapsed into itself. And suddenly, they were back in the woods. Jake hit the ground, his hands sinking into damp leaves and dirt. The air was thick, humid, pressing against his skin. Emily coughed beside him, gasping for breath. Sophie scrambled backward, her eyes wide with terror. What? How? Marcus groaned, rolling onto his side. I don't. Jake sat up, his head pounding. The cabin was gone. No ruins, no foundation, nothing. Just trees. thick, looming trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. And then, a voice, soft, mocking. Better. Jake froze. Slowly, he turned, and there, standing just a few feet away, was the fool, closer than ever before, smiling. Jake's throat went dry. What do you want? The fool's grin widened. His voice was almost playful. To see if you can win. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Win what? The fool didn't answer. Instead, he raised one skeletal, gloved hand and pointed. Jake followed the direction of his fin. Up ahead, barely visible through the trees, was another cabin. Smaller, older, and its door was already open. Waiting. The fool's voice whispered through the trees. Your turn. And just like that, he was gone. But the game was far from over. Chapter 6. The house that shouldn't exist. The fool was gone, but his presence still clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Jake's heartbeat hammered against his ribs as he stared at the cabin ahead. It was wrong. It looked too old, too decayed, like it had been there for centuries, despite the fact that none of them had ever seen it before. The open door yawned like a mouth, inviting them inside. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. We can't go in there. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead. Do we even have a choice? Sophie's arms were wrapped around herself. We run. We find a way back to town. We don't play this game anymore. But deep inside, they all knew there was no running. The fool wasn't chasing them. He was leading them. Jake swallowed hard. We go in. Emily grabbed his wrist. Jake, he turned to her. We don't have a choice. If we don't follow the game, it'll get worse. Emily's fingers trembled against his skin. But she knew he was right. Without another word, they moved toward the cabin. Each step felt heavier, as if the earth itself was fighting to hold them back. The air grew colder. The wind died. And then, the moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them. A sharp, deafening bang. Sophie let out a strangled gasp and spun around, clawing at the handle. No, no, no. Locked. Marcus pounded on the wood. Damn it. Emily turned to Jake, her voice shaking. Now what? Jake forced himself to look ahead. The inside of the cabin was impossible. It was larger than it should have been. Too large. The walls stretched high into shadows that had no ceiling. The floor was warped, uneven, as if it had been built over something alive. And then there were the doors, 12 of them, lining the walls, each identical, old, wooden, featureless. 12 doors for 4 people. Emily took a shaky step forward. What is this? Marcus's voice was tight. Some kind of sick joke. Then the laughter began. Not from any direction. Not from the walls. From inside their heads. It curled into their skulls, slithering down their spines. The fool was watching. And then the writing appeared, carved into the rotten wood, right in front of them, as if an invisible hand was dragging a blade across the surface. 4 players, 4 chances. Choose a door. Emily let out a soft, horrified sob. No. Marcus took a step back. I'm not playing this game. But they all knew. They already were. Sophie shook her head violently. If we open one, something horrible will happen. Jake's fingers curled into fists. If we don't, something worse will. Silence. Then, slowly, hesitantly, Jake stepped forward. His breath came in short, sharp gasps as he reached out. His fingers hovered over the doorknob of the third door from the left. The moment his fingertips touched the wood, the room shifted. The air cracked, bent, twisted, and suddenly, the door wasn't a door anymore. It was a mirror, but the reflection wasn't Jake. It was something wearing his skin. Jake stumbled backward, his chest heaving. Jesus, Marcus grabbed him. What the hell was that? But before Jake could respond, the other doors began to change. The second door from the right peeled like flesh, revealing something moving underneath. The fourth door on the left let out a slow, rattling breath, and the 12th door at the far end, it opened just a crack, revealing a sliver of pitch-black nothingness. Then, a hand shot out, pale, skeletal, clutching at the air. Sophie screamed. Marcus yanked her back as the hand twitched, convulsed, then snapped back into the darkness, vanishing as the door slammed shut. Silence fell over the room. Then, in the flickering light, the writing on the walls changed. The letters shifted, rearranging themselves into something new. Jake's stomach dropped as he read the words. Try again. The doors creaked. One by one, they began to open. All of them. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Emily clung to his arm. Jake, what do we do? His mind raced. There was no logic, no pattern. And then, the fool's voice whispered from every door at once. Choose wisely. And then, the screaming began, not from them, from the doors. 12 voices, some human, some not. Begging, pleading, laughing. The walls breathed, the floor shuddered, and one by one, the doors began to pull them in. Chapter 7. The Doors of No Return. The doors yawned open, and the cabin came alive. Not in a way that could be explained, not in the way houses creak or shift in the night. This was something else, something hungry. The walls breathed like living flesh. The wooden floor twitched beneath their feet. The air smelled of rotting leaves, damp earth, and something metallic. Blood. Then, the pulling began. An unseen force yanked at them. Cold hands they couldn't see, grabbing at their clothes, their skin, their hair. Sophie let out a strangled cry as her feet slid toward the third door on the right. I can't stop it. Marcus lunged, wrapping an arm around her waist. Hold on, Emily shrieked as her body jerked toward a different door. The 11th one, which gaped like the mouth of something ancient and starving. Jake dug his heels into the warped wood, straining against the force. Don't let it take you. The fool's laughter coiled through the cabin, soft, mocking. It whispered from every door. One for each of you, one path, one fate. Choose. Jake clenched his teeth. No, he wasn't playing by its rules. He forced himself to focus. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, but he knew better. This wasn't a normal place. It didn't follow normal rules. His eyes darted between the doors. Some were dark voids. Others had things inside, moving, watching. The 12th door was different. It was open just an inch, But instead of blackness, there was a faint glow, not inviting, but less hostile. Jake made a decision. Fast, he lunged for Emily just as her foot slipped past the threshold of her door. He wrenched her back and spun, gripping Marcus and Sophie by their arms. "Move," he barked. They didn't question him. They ran. The floor twisted, warped, trying to pull them back. Hands burst from the walls, skeletal, nail-less fingers grasping at their ankles, their shirts. Jake didn't stop, didn't think. He kicked a grasping hand out of the way, grabbed the 12th door's handle, and yanked it open. White light exploded around them. A deafening howl tore through the cabin. The other doors slammed shut all at once. The entire room shook violently. Then, silence. Jake's ears rang, his vision blurred from the brightness. His body felt weightless, and then they were somewhere else. The other side. Jake hit the ground hard. Dirt, cold, damp dirt. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed himself up. His limbs ached, his head spun. Emily groaned beside him, coughing. "What? Where?" Marcus sat up, shaking his head. "Are we dead?" Sophie let out a soft whimper. "I don't think we're that lucky." Jake forced himself to look around. They were no longer in the cabin. They were in a clearing, a place that shouldn't exist. The trees around them were wrong, tall, twisted, their bark blackened and cracked as if burned from the inside out. The sky above wasn't a sky at all, just an endless stretch of swirling gray mist. And in front of them, a house. Not the cabin, not the ruins. Something bigger, older. The fool's voice drifted through the clearing. "Good choice, but it only gets harder from here." The house's front door creaked open. Jake felt a chill crawl down his spine. Inside, he swore he saw something move. Not a person, not an animal. Something that had been waiting. Marcus exhaled sharply. "No, no, no, no. We are not going in there." Jake turned to him, his hands shaking. "Marcus, no, Jake, this is insane. We just escaped, and now you want to..." Emily whispered, "We didn't escape." Jake looked at her. Her face was pale, her eyes locked on the ground. Slowly, she lifted a trembling hand and pointed. Jake followed her gaze and felt his blood run cold. Because behind them, the cabin was still there, but it had changed. The wood was rotten, the walls covered in bloodstains. The doors were gone, the windows were gone, and the worst part, their bodies were still inside. Jake's stomach dropped. There, through the warped glass of the single remaining window, he saw himself, saw all of them, still trapped inside, still screaming, still dying. Marcus took a step back, horror filling his eyes. "This isn't real. This isn't real." Sophie's breath hitched. "Then what is it?" Jake didn't have an answer, but deep in his gut, he knew. They weren't outside the game. They were just on another level. The fool had more tricks, more rules. And now, the house was waiting. Its door stood open. Inside, something breathed. Something smiled. And then, the whispers started again. From inside the house, calling them in. Chapter 8. The house that watches. The house waited. Its open door was a black hole, swallowing the light, swallowing the sound, swallowing them. Jake's throat was dry. We can't go in. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Oh yeah, and what's the alternative? Stand out here until that thing in the cabin comes for us. Sophie whimpered. What if this is the next part of the game? Jake swallowed hard. It was. They all knew it. Emily took a slow, shaky step forward. Maybe we just look inside. Just see what's in there. Jake hated the idea. Every nerve in his body screamed no, but what choice did they have? Behind them, the cabin still stood, impossibly old and wrong. And inside it, their own corpses stared back at them. No, there was no going back. There was only forward, only the house. Stepping into the darkness, Jake went first. The air changed the moment he crossed the threshold. Colder, thicker, like stepping into a grave. The others followed, moving in slow, hesitant steps. Then the door slammed shut behind them. A dull, heavy boom. Sophie gasped, spinning around. No, not again. Marcus grabbed the handle, jerking it hard. Locked, of course. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. This is a nightmare, a sick, twisted nightmare. Jake ignored them, focused. The house was massive on the inside. The walls stretched up, vanishing into shadowed heights. The furniture was wrong, its shapes distorted, the angles impossible. The floor creaked like bones under their weight. But worst of all, the portraits. They lined the walls, hundreds of them. Each one was a painting of someone screaming, their faces twisted in agony, their mouths stretched unnaturally wide. Jake's stomach twisted. Jesus Christ. Marcus reached out toward one of the frames. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the eyes moved. Marcus jerked his hand back. What the? The painted lips twitched. The mouths began to whisper. Not all at once. One by one. A chorus of pleas. Help me. I can't get out. It's watching. Jake's breath hitched. Emily grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. Jake, we need to go. But there was no door, only a long, endless hallway stretching forward. A hallway that hadn't been there before. The hallway that shouldn't exist. They walked because there was nothing else to do. The hallway twisted, turning in ways that didn't make sense. The air smelled of dust, mildew, and something rotting. Then, footsteps. Not theirs. Something ahead of them. Something big. A shadow moved at the end of the hallway. Too tall. Too thin. Its limbs were wrong. Jake stopped breathing. The shadow twitched, jerked. Then it ran. Straight at them. Jake didn't think. He just shoved Emily to the side, grabbing Sophie and Marcus as they bolted. The walls shuddered around them. Doors appeared, vanished, shifted. Jake's lungs burned as they ran, their footsteps thunderous against the wooden floor. Then, a door opened on its own. Jake had no time to hesitate. He dove inside. The others followed. The door slammed shut behind them. The clock room, silence. Jake panted, pressing his forehead against the door. Listening. No footsteps, no whispers, just ticking. He turned around. The room was filled with clocks, hundreds. They covered the walls, the ceiling, even the floor, all ticking at different speeds. Some fast, some slow, some backward. Emily shivered. This place. Then one of the clocks stopped. A loud, echoing click, then another. Click, and another. Click. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. The clocks weren't just stopping. They were watching. The hands of the clock clocks shifted, twisting, bending toward them, like pointing fingers. And then, the ticking turned into laughter, soft, mocking. Jake turned, his breath catching in his throat, because in the reflection of the glass, he saw something standing behind them. Not just one thing. 12 figures. Motionless. Staring. And then one stepped forward. Its face was wrong. It was Jake's, but not him. The copy smiled and spoke. Time's running out. Then the clocks exploded. Chapter 9. The Spiral of Madness. Glass shattered. The explosion of sound was deafening. Tiny shards rained down like razor-sharp snowflakes, cutting into their skin. Jake threw up his arms, shielding his face. A searing pain ripped across his forearm, blood, warm and slick. Sophie screamed. Emily stumbled backward, pressing against the wall, only to find no wall at all. The room was changing. No longer a chamber filled with clocks, no longer a space that even obeyed reality. Instead, a spiral staircase stretched downward, black iron, twisting, endless. The shattered clocks had vanished. The figures, the twisted doppelgangers, were gone. But Jake knew better. They weren't gone. They were waiting. Marcus groaned, wiping blood from his forehead. What the hell is happening? Where the hell are we? Sophie's breath hitched. This wasn't here before. Emily turned to Jake. What do we do? Jake's gut twisted. He looked up. No ceiling. He looked behind them. No door. No escape. Only the spiral. And it was waiting. A soft voice whispered from the dark. Keep going. You're almost there. The descent one step, then another. Their footsteps clanged against the iron. The air was thick, oppressive. The deeper they went, the worse it got. The air grew humid, as if they were sinking into the belly of something alive. Then, the walls began to change. The iron railings warped into rib bones. The steps softened, no longer metal. Flesh. Marcus gagged. Oh my God. Jake kept moving. He had to, because something was following them. A faint dragging sound, a rasping breath. Jake glanced over his shoulder. Nothing, but he knew the fool was still there, watching, playing its game. The deeper they went, the louder the whispers became. A chorus of voices, not human, not alive. Sophie shuddered. Jake, I think I hear. Jake turned to her. Her face was pale, eyes wide, filled with horror. She lifted a shaking hand, pointing at the walls. Jake's stomach dropped. The walls weren't just flesh. They had faces, dozens of them, twisted, mouths open in frozen screams. And the worst part, Jake recognized them, not personally, but from the paintings in the hallway, the trapped souls, and now they were whispering, their dead voices rising in a sick, dreadful song. You shouldn't be here. Turn back. It's hungry. Run, run. The thing beneath. A low rumble vibrated through the staircase. The flesh beneath their feet shuddered. Something moved in the dark below. A shadow. Something big. Marcus's breath came in ragged gasps. What the hell is that? Jake didn't answer, because he knew this was where the game led. The fool had guided them here for a reason. Emily clutched his arm, whispering, We have to go back. Sophie let out a shaky sob. There is no back. Then, a single deafening thump, like a heartbeat. Jake froze. The shadows below shifted, and then a hand reached out. Not human, massive, gray, twisted. Too many fingers, too many nails. Jake's body went ice cold. Sophie let out a choked scream. Marcus grabbed her, dragged her back up. "We're leaving." But Jake knew it was too late. The shadows surged upward, and the thing beneath the staircase laughed. The last door. Jake ran. They all did. But the spiral was longer now, endless. The thing was coming, pulling itself up the stairs. The whole world shook. The whispers became screams. And then, a door at the very bottom, carved into the very flesh of the spiral. A door with the fool's symbol. Marcos reached it first, slamming into it. "It won't open." Jake skidded to a stop beside him, his fingers scrabbling at the handle. Behind them, the creature rose, tall, twisted, its mouth split open. Too many teeth, too many eyes. It reached for them. And then, Jake saw it, the key, carved into the flesh of the door itself. A puzzle, a choice. The fool's voice drifted through the chaos, soft, mocking. "Which one of you will pay the price?" Jake's blood turned to ice. Because he knew what the fool meant. It wasn't asking for an object. It was asking for a person. One of them had to stay behind. One of them had to die. Jake turned to the others. Sophie sobbed, pressing herself against the door. Emily looked at him, realizing the truth. Marcus clenched his jaw, shaking his head. Jake exhaled. Someone had to choose, and the creature was almost upon them. The price had to be paid. Chapter 10. The Price of Souls. The air was thick with fear. The creature behind them was almost upon them, its claws scraping against the iron stairs, making the entire spiral quake beneath their feet. Jake's heart was pounding in his chest. Every breath felt like it would be his last. The walls seemed to close in, their flesh groaning under the weight of the thing's advance. The laughter, that maddening, unnatural sound, echoed from the creature's mouth, each note twisted with hunger. Who will it be? The fool's voice was everywhere, in the air, in their heads, inside their bones. Jake's stomach turned. They were running out of time. He could feel the presence of the creature growing nearer, its monstrous shadow stretching across the steps. It was only a matter of moments before the thing would tear through them like paper. But there was the door. That single last hope. The door with the fool's symbol, the key carved into it. The question that had been tormenting them from the moment they had set foot in this place. Which one of you will pay the price? Marcus, Sophie, and Emily were all looking at him, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. They knew the truth now. They knew that one of them had to stay behind. One of them had to be the sacrifice for the door to open. But none of them wanted to admit it. None of them wanted to be the one to choose. Jake's heart beat harder in his chest. It wasn't supposed to be this way. They had fought so hard to survive. They had made it this far. They shouldn't have to make this decision. The creature's growl vibrated through the air. It was closing in. Its jagged, too-many-teeth mouth snapped like a trap. Sophie, her face drenched in tears, turned to Jake. "Jake, please, don't let it be me." Jake's blood ran cold. "No, Sophie, no one is," he started, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to fix this. Sophie's eyes were wide with panic, her hands shaking. "I'll stay behind, just to let us through, please." Her voice was breaking. Desperation laced every syllable. Marcus gritted his teeth. "No one's going anywhere without me." Jake glanced between them. There was no answer, no solution, only the door. The key carved into it. The question, the choice. Someone had to pay. "Please," Emily whispered, clutching at Jake's sleeve. "You can't make me decide." didn't finish, because suddenly the door opened, not with the sound of a lock turning or the creak of old hinges, but with a deep, ominous exhale, like something that had been holding its breath for centuries had finally released it. The door glowed with an eerie, unearthly light. It was both inviting and terrifying, a portal into the unknown. It was empty and full, all at once. Behind them, the creature's claws scraped the steps again, closer this time, its presence overwhelming, suffocating. It was no longer a distant threat. It was a hunting predator closing in. They had seconds left. Jake's mind was a blur, caught between the paralyzing fear and the horrifying realization that there was no escape. They couldn't outrun it. They couldn't fight it. The price had to be paid. Then Sophie spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll stay." Jake froze. "What?" Sophie's eyes were filled with tears, but there was something else in them too, resignation. "I'll stay behind," she said again, her voice stronger now. "It's me. I'll make the sacrifice. It's the only way we all get out." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but Jake stopped him. His eyes locked with Sophie's, seeing the pain and the finality in them. The creature's growl grew louder, its presence nearly suffocating, but Sophie didn't back down. Her eyes never left Jake's. "Go, I'll hold it off." Jake couldn't speak. The words caught in his throat. He wanted to tell her no, wanted to scream that they could find another way, that they didn't have to sacrifice anyone. But the truth was undeniable. There was no time. The door, the choice. Jake slowly, reluctantly reached for the handle. His heart was a heavy stone in his chest. He could feel the weight of the decision in every breath he took, in every beat of his broken heart. He looked at Sophie one last time, and then he stepped through. The final moment. The light on the other side of the door was blinding, but Jake didn't dare hesitate. He heard the others behind him, their voices fading, lost to the all-consuming brightness. But as he stepped through, he paused. Behind him, Sophie was still there. She was standing at the door, her face pale but calm, and the creature had reached the bottom of the spiral. Jake's heart stopped. Sophie looked at him once more, and then the door slammed shut. He was alone, the other side of the door. Jake collapsed to his knees as the light faded, his body trembling. He felt like he had just escaped from the grip of death itself, but even as he looked around, the world didn't seem quite right. Everything was too still, too silent. Then he noticed something, a shadow in the distance. It was faint at first, a figure that was both distant and all around him. The fool. Jake's breath hitched, and then he understood. The choice wasn't just about one life. It was about them all. The fool had tricked them, had used them, had made them play. And now they were all locked in the game. No one ever truly escaped. Chapter 11. The Fool's Realm. The air was thick with silence, the kind that pressed down on your chest, suffocating all thoughts. Jake was kneeling in the center of a vast, empty space. His knees felt cold against the hard, smooth surface beneath him, and his hands trembled as they touched the ground. It felt as though he had stepped into another world, one that was distorted, where reality was slipping like sand through his fingers. The light from the door had faded as soon as it closed, and now there was only a soft, unsettling glow emanating from nowhere in particular. No ceiling, no walls, just an expanse that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. The shadows, though, were moving, flickering, dancing. Jake's heart was beating rapidly, but his body felt numb. He wanted to scream, to shout, to fight his way out of this place. But there was no one around, no sound but his own breath. He looked around, his eyes desperately searching for something, anything that could explain where he was, what was happening. Then he saw it, a figure standing in the distance. It was tall, thin, wearing a long tattered cloak that billowed around its feet like mist. Its face was obscured by a mask, not a mask made of porcelain or metal, but something more sinister, a smiling face made from bones. The fool, the one who had led them here, the one who had twisted their fates, their lives, into this horrific game. Jake's stomach churned. The fool began to walk toward him, slow and deliberate. Each step was accompanied by the creaking of bones and the faint sound of whispers, like the echoes of 1,000 voices murmuring in unison. As the fool got closer, Jake's chest tightened. What was this place? What had happened to Sophie? To the others? The fool stopped a few feet away, tilting its head slightly, as though studying him with eyes that Jake could feel even though they were hidden beneath the mask. The air around them grew colder, and a sharp, nauseating smell began to permeate the space, a mix of rot and decay. "You're alone now," the fool said, its voice soft yet carrying an unearthly weight, like it had been dragged through time itself. "Do you regret your choice?" Jake didn't answer immediately. The words were caught in his throat, suffocating him. He wanted to say so much, to scream, to beg for mercy, but nothing would come out. The image of Sophie, her face pale but calm, haunted him. She had stayed behind to save them, to let them escape. She had sacrificed herself, but it had been a lie. It had all been a lie. "Where is she?" Jake finally managed to choke out. "Where is Sophie? What have you done to her?" The fool's head tilted the other way, as though amused by Jake's pain. "She paid the price. Her soul is now mine. The game is over for her. But you are free. For now." "Free?" Jake echoed, his voice trembling. "I'm not free. This isn't freedom. Don't you see?" The fool interrupted, its voice rising like a haunting melody. "This was never about escape. The price was never meant to be paid just to leave. The true cost is far greater." Jake clenched his fists, feeling the bite of his nails against his palms. "What are you talking about? What do you want from me?" The fool took a step closer, its skeletal smile widening. "I've given you the choice, Jake. I've given you the power to determine who lives and who dies, to choose who stays and who leaves. But there's always a price for such choices." Jake's breath quickened. He could feel the weight of its words hanging in the air, thickening it with dread. He felt the sharp sting of regret pierce through his chest, like 1,000 knives stabbing into his heart. "You were never meant to escape," the fool continued, its voice now echoing, as though the room itself was speaking in chorus with it. "This is the fool's realm, where choices matter, where your soul is weighed against the lives of others. And now..." The fool paused dramatically. "Now you must pay." Jake's head spun. The ground beneath him seemed to shift, and the walls of the realm morphed, like an illusion coming apart at the seams. He stumbled forward, his vision blurring. The fool's words echoed in his ears, too loud to ignore. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. The fool's laughter filled the space, a sound so cold it made Jake's bones feel brittle. "I want you to understand, Jake. There's no going back. You can try to resist, but it won't matter. The price must be paid." Jake's knees buckled and he fell to the ground. He gripped the cold surface beneath him, fighting to stay conscious. The creature, the fool, was right. There was no escape from this, no choice that would lead to freedom. The game had been set, and he had played it. Now he had to pay the price. The fool's voice was soft, almost pitying now. "You will never leave this place, no matter how much you try. The door you walked through was not the escape. It was the beginning, the final game, and now you are its player." Jake's eyes widened as he realized the full weight of the fool's words. He wasn't just trapped in this place, he was part of it now. The fool had manipulated him from the start, using his fear, his desperation, his decisions to lead him here. To this fateful moment, the fool's form shifted, changing like liquid. It no longer had a distinct shape, just a blur of darkness and shadow. The air grew thick with static energy, crackling around him like a storm that would tear the very world apart. The realm around him was fading, warping into something darker. Jake's heart raced, and his thoughts became a jumble of confusion. "What's happening? What have you done to me?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls that no longer existed. The fool's voice whispered again, its tone low and chilling. "You are part of the game now. You will always be. And when the time comes, you'll understand." And with that, the fool vanished, leaving Jake alone in the darkness. Chapter 12. The Final Game. The air was oppressive, the silence unbearable. Jake felt it closing in around him, the weight of it pressing on his chest, making it difficult to breathe. His mind was a tangle of confusion, rage, and fear. Yet beneath it all, there was one undeniable truth. He was trapped. Trapped in the fool's realm. The world around him had dissolved into a void of darkness, broken only by the faint glow of distorted light that seemed to emanate from every corner of his mind, not from any source he could see. The ground under his hands was now soft, almost like sand, shifting and changing with every step he tried to take. He could no longer tell where the floor began or ended. It felt like he was floating, yet at the same time, he was tethered to this nightmare, bound by something much deeper than physical constraints. His eyes scanned the endless expanse. There was no horizon, no point of reference, just an overwhelming, crushing emptiness. The fool had disappeared. For a moment, it seemed like the world was at rest, as if time itself had stopped. But Jake knew better. The game had only just begun. The final game. The words whispered to him, faint, like a distant memory trying to resurface. But the fool's voice wasn't gone entirely. It lingered in the air, swirling around him like a malicious presence. Jake clenched his fists. No, he wouldn't let it consume him. He had to find a way out. He had to. The ground beneath him shifted again, and suddenly the light flared, brighter than before. It was blinding. Jake shielded his eyes, blinking as his surroundings began to materialize once more, like fragments of a broken mirror coming together piece by piece. When the light finally dimmed, Jake found himself standing at the center of a large arena, its vastness making him dizzy. The floor was solid now, a cold stone, worn with age, cracked and scarred by countless footsteps. The walls rose high, far beyond his line of sight, each one etched with strange, indecipherable symbols. The air was thick with a heavy, almost metallic scent. And there, in front of him, stood the fool. Its form was now even more distorted, a monstrous silhouette cast against the eerie, flickering lights. It wasn't just a figure anymore, it was a presence. Its mask, the one made of bones, was even more twisted, the grin wider and more disturbing, if that was possible. It seemed to morph, its edges shifting like the boundary between nightmare and reality. "Welcome, Jake." The fool's voice was a low, rumbling echo that vibrated through the air. "You have arrived at the final stage, the endgame." Jake's heart skipped a beat. Endgame. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. He had seen the depths of this nightmare, but this felt like something far worse. "What do you want from me?" The fool laughed, but it wasn't a sound of joy. It was cold, hollow, like something scraped together from the deepest pits of the underworld. "I want nothing, Jake. I've already had everything. This is your moment of truth." Jake's legs wobbled beneath him, but he forced himself to stand tall, eyes fixed on the creature in front of him. "What does that mean?" he demanded. "What do you want me to do?" "The price has already been paid," the fool replied, its voice rising with each word, resonating with an unnatural force. "Now, you must choose, just as you did before. But this time, there is no escape. There are no second chances." Jake's stomach churned. He could feel it, the weight of everything he had done, everything he had witnessed. Sophie, Marcus, Emily, all of them had made their choices, but now they were just pieces on a board, discarded and forgotten. The fool raised its bony hand and gestured toward the center of the arena. Jake's eyes followed, and what he saw made his blood run cold. At the center of the arena, on a raised platform, were three figures. Their forms were shadowed, their features obscured. But Jake knew. He knew who they were. The silhouettes were all too familiar. Their outlines, their postures. It was Sophie, Marcus, and Emily. But they were frozen, lifeless, like puppets suspended in time. "No!" Jake cried out, his heart shattering at the sight. He took a step forward, his mind racing. "What have you done to them? What is this?" The fool's smile stretched even wider. "You wanted to live, Jake. You wanted to escape. But you took their lives in exchange. And now the game continues. You must decide, will you stay or will you take their place?" A loud clang echoed through the arena, and Jake turned sharply, his eyes locking onto an ancient chest that had appeared beside him. The lid was cracked open, and a faint glow came from inside. He stepped closer, drawn to it as if something deep inside him was compelling him to look. Inside the chest, resting on a bed of velvet, was a single key. The key shimmered with a dark energy, its surface etched with strange, glowing symbols. But what made Jake's blood run cold was the shackle beside it, a thick iron chain that led to nowhere, its purpose unclear but undeniably ominous. The fool's voice was almost a caress now, its tone dark and intimate. If you choose the key, you will walk free, Jake. You will leave this place and your past will be erased. But if you choose the chain, you will remain here, forever bound to the game. You will never escape. The price will be paid in full. Jake stared at the key. His hands trembled as he reached for it. His heart raced, his mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. Was it really that simple? Just take the key and leave. Was it even possible to escape? But then he thought of them, his friends, their faces frozen in those lifeless, shadowed figures. He thought of the fool's twisted, mocking smile. Could he really leave? Could he truly live with the consequences of his decisions? No, Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. I won't be your pawn anymore. The fool tilted its head as if intrigued by Jake's response. So, you refuse the key, it said softly. You refuse to save yourself. How noble. Jake's hand hovered over the chain. His heart pounded in his chest as he made the final choice. He stepped forward, grabbing the cold, heavy chain and binding himself to the darkness. Suddenly, the arena began to tremble. The fool's voice echoed one last time, a laugh that felt like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. You chose the chain, Jake. Welcome to the final game. And as the world around him collapsed, Jake realized too late. The game had never ended. It had only just begun. The end